This time we found a vehicle that's a slap in the face of practicality. It's not an exotic car, but an exotic off-road vehicle, the Lamborghini LM002.
I am standing with what is probably one of my favorite cars of all time, one of my favorite cars from the Lamborghini brand. And of that, this is probably, I am gonna make a bold statement here, probably the best example of a Lamborghini LM002 that I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've grown up around these trucks. I have some really fond memories in the late 80s, early 90s when my father was authorized service for Lamborghini in Palm Beach. I'll never forget, he was servicing a black on Rosso example of an LM02. And I went to school a few times in basically this car with red interior. It had black tint. But I feel the need with this car here today to give you guys sort of a full in-depth look at the LM002 and why I feel it's so important and why this example is so important for Lamborghini and for just collecting in general. When you think of this truck, you think of 80s excessiveness and you think of, you know, everything that makes Lamborghini so great. Its bold design, the whole concept of an ultra uber luxury SUV. You know, some could say, you know, Land Rover and Range Rover in the 80s obviously had luxurious SUVs, but this just takes it over the top, especially when you think about the price of this car and when you think about the engine in this car. The Lamborghini LM002, this example here, actually has basically the same engine that was used in the Lamborghini Countach, the downdraft version, so this is the carbureted version, pumping almost 450 horsepower. Now, if you think about that in the 1980s, that was completely insane. You know, Range Rovers and all those other cars maybe had a couple hundred horsepower, if that. So you think of this as just such an extreme concept. Its size, its presence, and then you've got this beautiful leather interior with wood everywhere. And it really just you know, it's this perfect definition of what Lamborghini represented in the 1980s. Excessiveness, bold statement, and really you look at this vehicle today and it inspired all super SUVs of our time, luxury SUVs of our time. And it's just so cool. I think today, Lamborghini, the brand, is where it is today because of the Urus and because of this car. A couple very cool features to note specifically on this car, and one of my favorite things, these tires are no longer available, but these are the original Pirelli Scorpion tires. And these tires, what's so cool about them is you see this very pronounced lip. And this lip came on the original tires for this car. It's actually the sand lip. So basically, if you're driving, and this car is, you're able to drive through sand and sand dunes, it would actually push sand away from the tires. So very cool to see this car with its original tires. And the other thing that's so special about this car is Lamborghini produced between 1986 and 1993, 301 LM002s. So very rare cars. And for many years, these cars were very difficult to sell. The first few dozen went into the Middle East, as you'd expect. I mean, this would be the ultimate car in the 1980s of any Saudi sheikh or prince. And eventually later, they sort of found a following in the US. You have everybody from Sylvester Stallone, Mike Tyson.
You know who comes visit me? I'm Malcolm Forbes. All right, and know what he's driving? A green LM002. Yeah. Lamborghini truck, and I said, "What is that?" I didn't even say, "How you doing, Mr. Ford?" I said, "What is that? Yeah. What is that?" He's telling me about it. As soon as I found out how to get one, I got one, man. I had around 4.
You have a long list of iconic celebrities and owners. Now, what I love about these trucks is some of the anecdotes behind and period stories. There's a great story actually was Saddam Hussein, and his sons actually had 2 of these vehicles, and as well as Gaddafi. And Gaddafi's car still exists. I believe parts of it were made bulletproof. Uday Hussein's LM002 was actually blown up by the US military when they invaded Iraq. And so these cars have gone to definitely some interesting characters. Another character who I'm a massive fan of is Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson actually had 2. And there's this great story he talked about where he was so, I would say, medicated on certain types of drugs that he ended up telling his friends that he was going to use his 2 as bumper cars throughout the streets of New York. So imagine seeing 2 in 1987, 1988 LM02s being used as bumper cars in the streets of New York. So if we ever end up with the Mike Tyson LM002, it was definitely not. It was definitely in some sort of a fender bender. But just some great stories. There's another great story that we heard from one of the original test drivers, Cosimo, and he was talking about the first time going out in the Italian roads for homologation, and people were like stopping and freaking out, and he actually almost caused an accident because so many people were looking at the truck and just trying to understand what it was. So you can imagine, today vehicles like this are maybe a little bit more common, but back in the day, this was completely insane and completely not normal. But basically 301 were produced. The first version of cars were the carbureted version. And they didn't have, if you look, they didn't have any other additional side cladding. And they came in the highest horsepower, the carbureted examples. And then later, Lamborghini would introduce the fuel injected version. Fuel injection version had a lot less horsepower, probably a little bit more reliable than the carbureted version. And then Joe Nastasi with Lamborghini North America and Lamborghini announced 60 limited edition Americana versions. Those were the cars with the chrome bumperettes. They had side cladding here, they had different wheels, and they had fuel injection engine. So of that, you have the 60, and then you have the early carbureted versions, and then you have the other European fuel injection versions. What I love about this car as well is obviously the colors. So it's black, narrow tenebrae on narrow full interior. It's got the sand lips, it's got the carbureted high horsepower engine. And then, if you know anything about these cars, they were very, very, very crude, even brand new. We've got an incredible example that we sold a few years ago. It's got 1,000 original miles. And the paint, even while it's still in great shape, if you look at it, the car's very wavy and the fit and finish is not that great. It is like a truck in many ways. And the reason for that is the bodies were actually not built by Lamborghini. They were actually built by a Spanish bus company. And when you look at the side and you look at the hinges, you see it's normally very wavy. This very low mileage example, we're lucky enough to have been able to purchase it. It's going to an incredible home, a growing Lamborghini collection in the US, and this car underwent the most insane restoration. Now, I've seen other LM002s restored, but I've never seen anyone take the time to get an LM002 perfectly straight. All of the little nooks and crannies and the details of this are perfectly correct. When you look at this car, it's just jewelry. And you can imagine restoring a car like this. This is a massive task. You're talking about a massive car. You're talking about fiberglass. You're talking about all these different materials that was used in the production. And then black, with, if there's any painters out there, any restorers out there, black is one of the hardest colors to perfect, to get straight, to get perfect. When you look down this truck, it looks like you're looking at a mirror. And then obviously restoring every detail and fixture of this car is very difficult because parts are difficult to find. I think what's most interesting about the LM002 is really how it came to life. When you think of this, imagine in 1976, a American military contractor actually reached out to Lamborghini and had this idea for a car called the Cheetah. Cheetah's super famous. I had a bunch of toy models as a kid, and Lamborghini showed the car at the Geneva Motor Show. And it really, I think, took everyone by shock, but it was in a moment where you had a lot of military activations throughout the Middle East and all these things growing. So it seemed like a great business model for Lamborghini. Now, unfortunately, there were some legal battles and whatnot about the ownership of the Cheetah, the design property of the Cheetah, and the project was scrapped. This was also in a terrible time for Lamborghini. This is basically when Lamborghini was going through a period of bankruptcy and all these different things. But fortunately, because of Patrick Mimran and the Mimran brothers, Jean-Claude Mimran, who we've spoke about many times, Swiss playboys, entrepreneurs, businessmen, they were able to purchase Lamborghini in 1980, 1981, would revive the let's call it the luxury SUV, luxury truck concept. And their first example was first rebuilt in 1982, I believe, with the LM004. There's some great period photos of that. It actually, at one point, it was one of the pace cars of the Monaco Grand Prix. So very, very cool, some fantastic period photos. And then later, that would evolve into the production version of this, which would be launched in 1986. And I think they're just so fantastic. I went through some old magazine articles, and some of the descriptions from Brock Yates and some great editors is like, you know, this was a $120,000 vehicle in 1986. It weighed almost 7,000 pounds. I think it was 6,780 pounds. And was just so absurd, but it really just fits with the whole mentality and design process and engineering of Lamborghini to be absurd. So they're just so cool. I love these trucks. They are not the most reliable in the world. The clutch is extremely heavy. They're not very fast, as you can imagine, just because they are so heavy. But I think it's so cool, and they are just so gorgeous. I think any important Lamborghini collection has to have one of these. Even if you drive it once or twice a year, you know, it's just such a piece of history. So cool, so good looking, and I'm absolutely in love with it. If I had the money, I would buy this exact one, this color, this level of restoration, and it's just really an honor to share it with you guys. So during the 1980s, as you guys know, rally and Dakar and rallying and all these different things were very, very big in the world. And Lamborghini was working with the famous racing driver Sandro Minari. And Sandro Minari actually tested a Lamborghini LM002 for racing in different rallies. Now, as you guys remember, we were lucky enough to discover, in this crazy story, discover an LM002 that was actually used during the original Dakar rally. That car was actually, a full circle here, that car was actually originally delivered new to Patrick Mimran's wife, Miss Mimran, and then later would be sold to a Swiss entrepreneur who would go take it into the rally. It is believed there was about 4 or 5 different rally versions of the LM002. The factory built 2 cars that were built at the factory. Unfortunately, they had entered a few rallies. They were never really successful. There's another red example that was in the Dakar rally as well, but just so cool. And there's some great photos of these cars actually being used off-road. This is not, there is no fluff here. There is no question that the LM002 is a capable rally contender. And there's some great stories about Andrea Berenghi, who actually drove one of the LM002s. It was very reliable, it was very fast, but unfortunately, with the stock suspension, when he would come off a sand dune, the car was so heavy, it would actually blow out the shocks. Now, I don't know if this is true, but was recently speaking to another collector, and he was going through some old paperwork, or I guess he was talking to someone, and he was actually told that Michael Jordan had a Lamborghini LM002 at one point. So I don't know if any of our followers have any information about the Michael Jordan LM truck, or know if that was real or if he had one. I've never seen any photos. I've never heard the proof, but I would love to know more about the Jordan LM, because to me, that would be the holy grail of all LMs besides this one that we're standing with. But thank you guys again for watching. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and we're always looking for excellent LM002s. So let us know if you find anything.